Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. It's V, the Guerrilla Economist, coming to you live on this edition of The Great Game with the one and only Matthew Ehret. He is here with us. He is the founder of the Canadian Patriot.org, CanadianPatriot.org, as well as RisingTideFoundation.net, RisingTideFoundation.net. Make sure you go there, you sign up, get Matthew's books. It's absolutely invaluable to get those books, folks, and to have them part of your library. And also check out his Substack, substack.com/Matthew Ehret. The links will all be in the description box. And with that being said, gentlemen, how are you guys?
Very good.
And if
very
you'll
well.
Excuse me, guys. My allergies are on level 10 right now, so
yeah,
I apologize.
Gotcha.
Not a worry. Things are heating up. I mean, I only have about 30 minutes today. I know you guys have something planned as well at 2, so we'll try to keep it compact. Definitely a lot going on around the world. I don't even know where to start, frankly. But I figured one place would be, I mean, there's two big things that are in people's minds, I think, right now. Number one, the sabotage of the pipelines, which is very clearly not Putin's doing, despite the fact that the mainstream media I've been looking at is all alluding to the idea that, Putin had nothing to worry about. There's no reason for him, there's no motive for anybody but Putin to have sabotaged the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines. The reality is, as many in Europe are recognizing very clearly, that the only people who do have something to gain are the Americans, who are now in a position to sell vast amounts of natural gas to Europe, if they're even going to allow that to happen. Because frankly, at the end of the day, those forces controlling the United States, just like those controlling Great Britain, the Five Eyes more broadly, and the EU, are a death cult that kind of really do want the world population to collapse under this logic of scarcity. So, the idea that Putin actually sent submarines down, detonated charges in the Nord Stream 1 and 2, when he could have just turned off the tap at any moment from Moscow, is just absurd. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think the Russians did do it. I mean, after all, Matthew, they're evil. And, we have to fight them over there before we fight them over here. And, they have weapons of mass destruction, and they're the biggest funders of state-sponsored terrorism, man.
Yeah,
this is ridiculous. I mean, what people forget the most, Matt, is that here's Russia going to great lengths during the special military operation against Ukraine. They're going to great lengths as to preventing irreversible damage to civilian infrastructure, critical infrastructure, and whatnot. And in Russia, they have a pipeline that's been going from Russia to Ukraine that is still delivering Ukrainians gas, in spite of all the bullshit, right?
Yeah.
They're not blowing that up. They're not cutting that off. But they're going to take deep submarines, and they're going to go directly into the area of the water on the German side of things. And then they're going to detonate Nord Stream 1 and 2.
Well, this is where it's really brilliant. I saw CJ just pulled up a couple of video clips there of Victoria Nuland herself in January, and Biden a few weeks later in February, I think February 22nd, basically saying what they plan to do to Nord Stream 2 specifically, if there's any invasion of Ukraine from Russia's side. So, I mean, just go to the horse's mouth.
The horse's mouth is more like it.
Go to the horse's mouth.
We continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
That was very faint, but I think everybody could clearly hear, and if you couldn't, she just said literally, if Russia invades Ukraine, Nord Stream 2 will not happen one way or another.
Right.
January.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that? Exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control.
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
There you go.
There you go.
Right from the horse's mouth.
You know, I mean, case closed. And I mean, anybody who thinks that Germany is a sovereign nation really needs to reevaluate their Cold War history, because Germany has always been an occupied state. The moment Hitler was put down, and you could even say Hitler himself was part of a certain imperial occupation of Germany, since the entire, as I've gone through in my books and we've talked about this, the entire rise of fascism of the Nazi variety on top of that in Germany was not a naturally organic phenomenon. Just like domestic terrorism in the United States is not a naturally occurring phenomenon, or terrorism in the Muslim world is not a naturally occurring sociological phenomenon the way we've been told. There is direct artificial patronage sponsors that come directly from the City of London, Wall Street, intelligence agencies centered around the invisible British Empire that are always behind the rise of these operations. And, you know, Nazism was not a popular thing. All the way through World War I, the Nazis first of all, didn't exist, but the idea of like the Nazi variant of fascism was not, it was like a fringe thing. You could ignore it in Germany all the way until the 20s. And it was through, I think there was something like 300 assassinations of high-level German statesmen on the municipal, federal, provincial levels who were killed in a matter of 3 years by things like the Organisation Console, an anarchist network, very highly organized and deployed by intelligence operations. They killed, like I said, over 300. And when they were illegalized, they didn't disband. They just changed their names and became the paramilitary front groups of the Nazi machine in the 20s. So this is what took over. And Prescott Bush, the Bush family, the Morgan crowd, the Rockefellers, Montague Norman, all of these things were always behind the rise of Nazism. So Germany at that point was already a colonized, occupied state. Not really what we were told was German nationalism was not really that at all. Hitler was always a front man being used as an enforcer for an imperial agenda of a banker's class above him. At a certain point, he didn't want to do that, so they had to put him down. But, after World War II, it's not like all of a sudden Germany then became a real sovereign country. You had the reconstitution of the entire Nazi intelligence apparatus around Reinhard Gehlen, Hitler's top intelligence guy, who was instituted by Allen Dulles and MI6 to be in charge of the entire West German intelligence and Eastern European intelligence as a whole. This was all done. And, to this day, Germany has thousands of U.S. soldiers. They are a branch of the U.S. military-industrial complex. There are hundreds of bases there. And Merkel, even, not that long ago, the former chancellor, had a bit of a scandal because she was pushing back a little bit. And at a certain point, when she kicked out the top CIA guy who was in charge of Germany because, her phone was being tapped and it was a bit embarrassing. Everyone knew it, but you weren't supposed to let the public know it. So that got through into the press, and she had to do something. So she kicked out the CIA's head. I forgot his name now, but the person who was in charge of managing the CIA operations in Germany. And they didn't stop. They kept on doing what they do. So Germany's always been an occupied state. Though, again, there are pushbacks, and we see that with certain efforts by patriots in France and Germany at different times who don't want to be suicided under this altar of a mass global suicide regime that wants to reduce the world population down to 1 billion. They don't want to be caught in the crossfire of a nuclear war. Putin has even come out saying, we will be, if we are pushed to an existential brink, we will be forced to use nuclear weapons, which, by the way, are much more advanced with hypersonics and other advanced tech that is much more advanced than anything the West has developed. Now, of course, in the West, our media is telling us, oh, look, Putin is threatening us with nuclear bombs. He's obviously the aggressor. It's like, no, he very clearly made the point that if he is pushed to an existential brink, yes, it will be used. But the context is very important, because do we have to push him to an existential brink? Hell's no. That doesn't have to happen.
But Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken were out there saying that that he's threatening nuclear war on us. What do we do?
Did you see the Blinken meeting with the lead singer of Pussy Riot at the State
Department? You got to be shitting me. You got to be kidding me. Really, man? That really happened?
He did a press conference and had a photo op with the pussy riot because that's like the highest level.
Well, you know,
representation you can get
Blinken
in Russia.
is a failed musician, so I could see that happening.
Right.
You know, his real dream was to be a rock star, and that went sideways. So that he's doing the next thing, which being a mediocre mind. The way you succeed in life is to join American politics. That's why you have that Twinkie with clipped hair, Victoria Nuland, who's done nothing but fail forward her entire life. Who ran a think tank called something about war studies. This fat Twinkie knows something about war. This fat Twinkie who has a political science degree and a law degree knows something about combat. And look at this moron.
Yeah, CJ's got it. Yeah, there you go.
I'm embarrassed, man.
You're right.
I'm really embarrassed.
I don't know what she's holding on her face there, but that's who they're bringing out to represent the democratic voice of the true Russian people.
Oh yeah, the true Russian people.
The true influential people are only on TikTok. You know that,
no,
Matthew.
Sure. You know, the Cossacks should have whipped them harder when they had the chance.
Yeah, and I'm sure people know how she and her little weird group became celebrities. Is they went into an Orthodox church and basically wrecked the place with some terrible song. I won't even call this music. Filmed it, and of course there are laws against destroying property in a church in Russia. So they got arrested and became celebrities in the entire Soros Democratic Network for freedom in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So she, and this also, it reminds me a little bit of, I forget which article I had read that was attacking Xi Jinping because Xi Jinping made some policy which made it difficult for Lady Gaga to perform in China a while ago. And they were like, Lady Gaga represents everything Xi Jinping in China is afraid of because of her unapologetic individuality. They even mentioned in this article attacking China and defending Lady Gaga as the paragon of Western liberal democracy in action. That she innovated vomit performances.
Yeah,
and
it's
indeed,
so
I made the mistake of Googling this shit, and I mean to the detriment of my entire subconscious field forever.
Yeah.
And sure enough, you could see hundreds of videos of her performing with professional vomit artists who, while in the middle of her song, will vomit on her with, of course, multicolored fluorescent vomit. Somehow, I don't know what they drink. That's a thing. That's apparently a thing.
Yeah, among the fetishizers of the West, it is the thing. It is disgusting, man. Like these Western elites, they gotta go. And here's my fear, right? It's like, will they burn it all down to the ground rather than face accountability? That's the question.
Well, that's where you're wondering, like a lot of people thought that they had a certain boundary condition, that there was a lot of bluff in their saber rattling. But you're like, well, to what degree are they actually willing to go the distance, even at the expense of their own lives? Because the oligarchy, I don't think they really want to live in underground bunkers. As comfortable as those underground bunkers might be that many of these, obscenely rich freaks have created for themselves, I don't think they really want to live down there for God knows how many generations under a nuclear holocaust on the earth. But to what degree are they willing to go the distance? Are they insane enough to actually unleash that type of chain reaction process with the thousands of nuclear bombs littering the face of the earth today, such that they would do that? I don't know. I don't know that they have like a real red line of reason saying, okay, we've gone as far as we can go. They've called our bluff. Let's fold. We'll maybe try to fight another day. I don't know. I have no idea. No idea. But I mean, you listen to things like Liz Truss as well. I mean, she gave a speech this week, which was absurd. She literally, I mean, this is a woman who just kissed the ass of King Charles, saying we've entered a new Carolingian age.
She meant to say a Caligulan age. We've entered a new Caligulan age.
Yeah, let's go for that.
The Iron Twit. Liz Truss, the Iron Twit.
She's talking about that. She says that, keeping in mind, right, Charles is the indisputed monarch, not only of Britain and the Commonwealth, all 52 countries, but also of the Privy Council system. He's the head of that. He's the major, as we talked about last week, the world's top landowner, by far, owns all the crown land, crown corporations. Also the head of the church. He's the the sort of the Anglican Pope is the crown, is Charles now. He's the head of a church. Anglican churches all over the world have to have pictures of King Charles III. So she's kissing this guy's ass in her speech, and then says, and I actually wrote it down because it was so over the top, the hypocrisy of it, that she says there is a real struggle between democracies, of which she is not a member of a democracy at all. Nobody even voted for her. Right? The population didn't vote for her. It was her own party who voted for her, not the people. And okay. And you got a crown that you're self-worshiping. But she said there's a real struggle between democracies and autocracies.
God, that tired line.
Yeah. And she goes further. She says, unless democratic societies deliver on the economy and security of the people, we will fall behind. What the hell does that mean? You're talking about somebody who is directly responsible for an empire which has shut down all viable forms of energy, which the people desperately need going into winter. There's going to be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of deaths, probably even more, who knows, going into the winter when people can't afford their heating. Businesses are going to be shut down en masse. I think something like 60% of pubs in Britain are saying they're contemplating shutting down and going bankrupt this winter because they can't afford their obscene gas prices. You've put the nation reliant upon 25% of Britain's energy comes from windmills, yeah, which are have a capacity of less than 1% on days where it doesn't blow or where the wind doesn't blow. I mean, and you're wondering why it is that you're creating so much available abundant energy, which you'd think in our modern age should be very easy to come by, is so hard to come by all of a sudden. On top of the fact that you're saying, and she called in the same speech, we are cutting off toxic power and pipelines from authoritarian regimes. Toxic power.
Yeah.
Thank God, you beacon of freedom, that you're cutting the people off of their toxic reliance on toxic power. I mean, the level of insanity in that thinking is over the top. So, I mean, they're trying to just revive all of these World War II tropes where you had the democratic allies versus the authoritarian fascist states. And it's just words. And they don't realize that the nations that are actually fighting for the freedom of people to live without hunger, without fear of being blown to pieces, are Russia, are China, these so-called authoritarian regimes. Because, I mean, who's to say freedom is not just the right to do whatever you want, to bust into any church and take a whiz on an altar, the way Pussy Riot might want to do, or get barfed on in public. And that's not, you might call that freedom and the basis of democracy. It's not really that. How about freedom to not starve to death or not be blown to bits by a jihadi group funded by the CIA in Syria? How about, is that a form of freedom?
I think you're asking too much, man. I think there's nothing wrong with being vaporized in a nuclear holocaust or freezing to death. It's very virtuous, Matthew. It's very virtuous.
It's true. It's true. You could definitely prove your patriotism to humanity by taking one for the team and just not eating this winter to fight big bad authoritarian Putin. That is sort of what they're trying to do, right? Is to convince people that you're better people for having less, eating bugs, and not using even your electric cars, right? Even that's now all of a sudden a bad thing. We thought that was a good thing. Well, it's not really a good thing, because if you use your electric car, if you're too greedy powering up your electric car, you might cause brownouts and blackouts of California or big chunks of Europe, which all of a sudden can't afford to maintain or supply even basic electricity for electric cars. Even that's now all of a sudden a bad thing. It's it's wild.
It's incredible. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, here we are in the modern world. It's 2022, and things that are supposed to get easier, energy, supply chains, things that are supposed to be more efficient, these have all of a sudden become inefficient. They're hard to come by. They're hard to find, and it's all done by incompetence and artificial scarcity.
Yeah.
This is incredible, man. You know, we are commentating and documenting, basically, Matthew, the decline and end of Western civilization. That's what it's looking like, buddy.
Well, that sort of is it. And I think that's a good point to sort of, the last point to tap into before we call it an end for today would be this irony that, and I this really hit me in the head when I'd read an article in the National Review this week written by a neocon, Jim Garrity, a complete rampant neocon. He's been a fanatic for 20 plus years. And in this article, he what was it called? I wrote it down. It's I forget. But it basically is celebrating the sabotage of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. Which again, these are not little sabotages. This is like these pipelines are down for years now. They're contaminated with seawater. This is big. Like any chance that Europe had to get out of the crisis of the energy scarcity crisis, it's really taken a huge hit. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do.
You can't. I mean, after that type of damage, you can't rebuild that. It'll take years to rebuild that.
Yeah,
the damage is pretty bad.
I'm very concerned. So all that to say, what this guy does, and again, he's a rampant right-wing neocon. He begins his article by citing something he had himself written back in February, saying, "Where are the Andrus Malms who could do something about this pipeline?" And what he was referring to, Andrus Malm, is an eco-primitivist, eco-terrorist who wrote a book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. It's a best-selling anarchist book. It's in all of the anarchist bookstores. I've seen it all over Montreal. And this guy has been creating a manifesto and working with an international network involving Extinction Rebellion, 0 Hour, the Sunrise Movement, networks of the Black Bloc internationally that are often funded by things like George Soros or the old Teddy Goldsmith network, the British oligarch. They've got an international movement around this idea that in order to be a good human being, you have to declare war on industrial civilization itself. Now, this is an irony because you got a neocon calling for an eco-fascist, not, you would think, the left of the left, who would be the most antithetical thing to a neocon that you could imagine, the right of the right. But you realize that in these extremes, things converge into the same place. And indeed, like when you look at the underlying philosophy of people like Malm, who I looked into a little bit, or Deep Green Resistance, which is a California-based similar eco-terrorist organization, Deep Green Resistance, based on a book. A lot of them got their start in inspiration by Ted Kaczynski. You guys know who Ted Kaczynski is?
Oh, yeah.
The Unabomber.
The Unabomber himself, the guy who spent like 25 years sending handmade bombs to different locations. I think he injured something like 28 people. He killed 3 people in that time. Somehow the feds, with over 150 people working over years purely on that one case, couldn't track this guy down. But all of a sudden, after 2 high-level executives for like Exxon are killed in 1995, he writes a letter to Janet Reno saying, "I want you to publish my 35,000-page manifesto on industry and civilization, basically how to destroy these things, in the New York Times and the Washington Post. I want you to do that, and then I'll stop killing." And of course, the Washington Post and the New York Times are like, "Nah, I'd really rather not do that." But Janet Reno with the FBI director, the active FBI director of that time, Louis Freeze, they intervene directly and tell the New York Times and Washington Post, "You have to." So they do it, and they publish the Unabomber's 35,000-page manifesto, which all of a sudden turns him into a bit of a celebrity. Mm-hmm. And in it, he's basically making the argument that human freedom must decrease in proportion to the progress of technology and science. So to the degree that technology goes up, freedom must go down to the point of maximum, a singularity point of maximum enslavement of the masses. And he talks about genetic modification, test tube babies. Now, the thing about this fallacy, which inspired the founders of the Deep Green Resistance, people like Derek Jensen, who is a founder of Deep Green Resistance, which is called for conducting terrorist acts on infrastructure, hydroelectric dams, pipelines, and they have a whole battle plan for above grounders who are going to infiltrate banks and official institutions in the World Economic Forum, and then the below grounders who are going to do the dirty work. They were all inspired by Ted Kaczynski. This guy Jansen had a correspondence for years with Kaczynski, who organized him to be this thing that was then deployed. And Andrus Malm is a part of this whole network. Even Andrus Bevik, the guy who shot up a bunch of kids on some island in Denmark, was a follower of Ted Kaczynski's dynamic, except changed a few things in his manifesto, but lifted big chunks from Ted's the Unabomber's manifesto into his thing, with a more right-wing twist. But it's all part of the same project. And ultimately, one of the big ironies is that Ray Kurzweil, a transhumanist, part of the whole Yuval Harari Davos crowd.
Yep.
Cited the Unabomber's manifesto in his own works on the future of thinking or feeling machines.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy is the head engineer for Google, a leading cult or priest of the cult of transhumanism. It's sort of the religion for the elites, a synthetic religion that was created as a neo-eugenics, social Darwinian system for the elites to be controlled by themselves, because they themselves are not, these upper level managers are not the ones driving the show. They have to have their own religious like belief for them to be usable on behalf of the oligarchy. So this guy is citing the Unabomber. Now, all of them have in common the same assumption that technology, just like Yuval Harari, right? Technology, as it increases, freedom must decrease. The only thing is, while Yuval Harari or Kurzweil think, well, that's inevitable, we should be on the controlling side of the levers of scientific power in that case, the other reactionaries who they feel disempowered. They don't have a positive sense of how science could also do good. They become reactionaries and think, well, thus a world without science and technology would be a world of peace and anarchic brotherhood, where we would just organically just self-organize in a big, hippie-like hug fest. And it's like, no, you don't realize, and even you'll find too that these groups are also rabidly anti-nation states. So even though many of these disempowered groups don't like conspiracy theories that are out to kill you, they don't like those things. Despite that, they think that the world would have been better if we just never had nation states and we all just broke ourselves down to like local small clusters and communes of little microeconomies, because the nation state as well is like a technological power, and technology, just like fire or a knife, could be used to destroy. Like great good or great bad can be used by, or the effect of power applied by people with intentions. The question is your people applying those intentions, are they in alignment with natural law and wisdom, or are they hateful and out of alignment such that they want to use those texts, including the power of the state and the power of genetic engineering or computer learning, whatever, to enslave and destroy? That's the question. So all that to say, you've got like this weird convergence of apparent opposites, which now we're finally seeing are different sides of the exact same thing. And unless people realize that, no, the fight is over, and this is why the oligarchy hates Russia and China, is because Russia, China, India, they're utilizing the technology of the nation state system in such a manner that it actually does battle with the oligarchy, which is a highly centralized, evil, supranational entity, and they're deploying investments, banking, and everything else associated with their security towards application of new discoveries, new technologies that allow for the increase of the quality of life of every individual as well as every nation state, in such a way that it is in alignment with the laws of nature, natural law, understood better by the founding fathers, Lincoln, and people way before we were alive. So I would just say that's how I think I would like to end it, because I know we've hit the 30-minute mark for today. But yeah.
Matt, you hit it on all cylinders, buddy. Thank you so much for joining us again, folks. Matt will be back next week, same channel, same time. Not same time, but usually on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Again, go check out CanadianPatriot.org, CanadianPatriot.org, RisingTideFoundation.net, RisingTideFoundation.net. Get the books, get the Substack, and get going, get learning. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us again, folks. Have a wonderful day. Take it away, CJ.